Welcome, everybody, to another edition of Latter Daily Digest. And today we're going to talk about a news story that's been on ABC News 4, and it's about yet another tithing class action lawsuit. I was going to say potential, but I think it is a class action. And I have with me Dr. Randall Bell, who will tell me if I'm right on that, not if it is or is not yet. Going into the details of basically what makes this one similar and different to other class actions or other lawsuits about tithing in general against the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and just what there is to know about it. So, Randy, do you want to start off a little bit with a little bit about yourself and what your experience is with class action lawsuits and any disclaimers you want to give?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Maven. Basically, I'm an expert in court. I'm an expert witness. And so I'm not an attorney, but I have been qualified and an expert in court, federal court, state court, in both class actions and regular civil tort. Tort basically means you don't have a contract with somebody, but they do something that harms you. So some lawsuits go to different venues and different causes of action, but class actions are a special niche, if you will, that are unlike other lawsuits. So I'm not dispensing legal advice. I would recommend anybody that has questions to talk to an attorney. And I just want to, do what I'm qualified to do and give things from my perspective and what class actions kind of generally look like, because they're new to a lot of people. There's all kinds of class action lawsuits. There's, environmental claims, which that's the field I work in, or one of them. I just did a big class action lawsuit with an oil spill. But generally the concept is this, Maven. Let's say you got a pen and it leaks on you and it messes up your hands and your clothes and stuff. Well, there's not enough economically there to justify a singular tort civil litigation lawsuit. But if you get 1 million people with the pen where the defective pen did the same thing and everybody gets, $6.75, well, that might make economic sense. So it's basically a way that the court can consolidate a whole bunch of people that are similarly situated into one lawsuit. And it's, like I say, it's different than regular lawsuits, and I'm happy to work through and answer questions that people might have about that. But that's kind of a quick introduction of me and class action lawsuits.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I'm going to go ahead and put on screen the news article, and it also includes the PDF for the lawsuit, and we'll have those in the show notes. So I just wanted to read this real quick. So this is out of Salt Lake City, Utah. I'm just going to make it a little bit bigger so that I can see. All right. So again, so this is put out January 30th, 2024, for those listening. And here's what it says. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is facing another lawsuit over the alleged misuse of member tithings, this time filed in the state of California by a married couple. This is the latest lawsuit to come from the fallout of whistleblower David Nielsen, a former senior portfolio manager with the church's investment arm, Ensign Peak Advisors. In December 2019, Nielsen claimed the church misused billions of dollars in tithes, including $1.4 billion to fund the City Creek Center in downtown Salt Lake City. So for those who may not be in the know, this is what's the difference that David Nielsen makes in these kinds of lawsuits? Are you familiar with that, Randy?
The basic difference between a regular lawsuit, I mean, let's say we have an auto wreck and I run into you, Maven, and I hit your car. That's going to be a lawsuit between you and me. Class actions are different because you have to have basically 4 categories approved by the court to get to what you call certification. So I write declarations not infrequently for class certification on typically in federal court. The first one is numerosity, which basically means you have to have a lot of people. You don't file a class action lawsuit when it involves just 2 people or 3 people or 5 people. You're typically talking about lots of people. I just did one in Texas with 30,000 people. So number one is numerosity to get it certified. Number two is commonality. In other words, there has to be something that's very much in common amongst all the class or potential class members. So you can't have somebody off in some big way here and then a big diversion with the others. There's a common theme with everybody. The third thing is typicality, which is basically saying that the class reps, because unlike a regular lawsuit where there's a plaintiff and a defendant in civil litigation, in class action lawsuits, you have representatives, and they have to be typical of the mass number of people. So the lawsuit I just mentioned in Texas, I forget, it was 3 or 4 class reps, maybe 7 or 8. It's a small number, usually generally under 10, but they have to have claims that are typical of all 30,000 people. That's another criteria. And the fourth thing is adequacy, which basically means that the legal representation is adequate and qualified to represent all 30,000 people or whatever the number is adequately. So the court determines these 4 things before you really even get in the courtroom. In other words, to get the class certified so you actually have a lawsuit to go forward with. So there's a whole big process, and it can take years, literally years, to go through that process.
So for number one, numerosity, is there a minimum amount of people that need to be involved for a class action lawsuit?
I don't know it's called black letter law. I don't know what the black letter law is, what the statutes say, but usually the cases I get involved with have so many people that's not even an issue because you're talking about thousands and tens of thousands of people.
Okay.
So I just don't know that black letter law on that one.
All right. And that's where the representatives come in because there's just not enough time in the world, I think, for a court to go through the individual of, if in your example, 30,000 people, the individual damages. So that's where you get the representatives in, right? They're supposed to be basically representing the damages for everybody else. And that's how that works. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly. On a fair and equitable basis across the entire class.
Okay. And then I think one thing to know about class action lawsuits, the way I understand it, is if a class action lawsuit does, win, if that's the right term, the damages awarded are split evenly among all of the participants. Is that correct? And that's why it can come out to a lot smaller amounts.
Yeah, good question. At least in the cases I'm involved with, it's kind of in proportion to your damage. So, excuse me. My specialty is real estate damage economics. So if you have a house that has an oil spill on it or hurricane damage or flooding or whatever the issue is, some homes are bigger than others, and some, the water may have just gone onto your front lawn of one person, but may have come into the house on another. So there's ways to adjust for that. The thing is that it's got to be comparable, not necessarily identical, but there has to be a typical story, but not necessarily does everybody in the class get this exact same amount.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. I think that's an important one. So I do know that there have been tithing lawsuits in the past that have been dismissed. And my understanding is that with what David Nielsen's whistleblowing was able to do, or maybe change the situation for some of these new ones, is that the church used tithing funds, I guess, in a for-profit venture. And that's what it could be proven that tithing funds went to the City Creek Mall. And that alone has been the only kind of a basis for any of these lawsuits to go. Am I understanding that correctly?
I think it is, but on this particular lawsuit, I got to be careful because it goes outside of my area of expertise.
This is outside of your scope.
Yeah.
Okay.
It really
No problem. Appreciate the honesty from that. So I did want to briefly mention the Huntsman lawsuit, and this is also mentioned in the article. It was initially, so Huntsman, for those who may not know, it's a big name in Utah. It's an extremely wealthy family, and so a very prominent person who has given far more in tithing than a lot of other members combined, I think is safe to say, due to the wealth and status that they've had. So with Huntsman's lawsuit, at least at one point, it was dismissed So yeah, I'm looking at this on the screen here. It was dismissed in September of 2021. However, that actually was overturned and the lawsuit was reinstated. So it's back on the books. And so some people might wonder, with Huntsman, why not combine what's, this lawsuit in California with Huntsman's recently reinstated trial? Do you have an answer for that?
I have no
I have a
answer. I can
guess,
just
but
say generally speaking, if you have somebody with a very large claim, I've seen class action lawsuits turned down because everybody's claim was $200,000 or $300,000. So the judge ruled, well, wait a minute, you don't need a class action lawsuit. This is for ballpoint pens and things where economically it doesn't make sense to bring individual claims. But a $200,000 or $300,000 claim for each homeowner doesn't justify a class action. You can bring individual claims for that. I don't know if that plays into this case or not. I really don't, and I have no opinion on that. But the courts do look at the magnitude, and you've got somebody very wealthy. They very well may have a claim different than the general class. So those are all determined by the court.
okay. And that's my understanding or my guess as to the reason why these lawsuits would not be combined or why Huntsman's couldn't be turned into one that everybody can bandwagon on as far as tithing goes. I certainly can say that as a tithe payer, mine absolutely would not have come anywhere close to what Huntsman donated for the church. So so if this moves forward, these will likely remain separate cases. It's unlikely we think that they'll be combined. I guess that's my guess. Then that's based on my limited understanding. So we can move on from there. But it would be, I think, the same premise. Basically, the whistleblowing done by David Nielsen has kind of opened this just tiny little crack in a door for this to potentially go through in a way that nothing has been able to achieve before this whistleblowing account. So, yeah. Do you have anything to add to that, or?
Not really. I think you said it well. It's all speculation, and that's the thing about whether it be regular tort, civil litigation, or class action, is that these processes go on for years. You'll get a ruling, and then it can be overturned by appeal. And I've seen that happen many times where you're excited and then all of a sudden it's turned over on appeal, or vice versa, or it's dismissed on a technicality, or a statute of limitations is blown, meaning you took too long to file the lawsuit. There's so many moving parts, and it really is complex. Plus, judges, you generally don't know what they're going to rule. I've seen judges say, hey, there's 4 things here, but they add something or they subtract something. There's a lot of discretion to the judges, who are generally very smart and they know what they're doing, but you're talking about massively complex things with massive amounts of money. And so I think with any of this kind of class action lawsuits, from the perspective of somebody who's in the lawsuit or thinking of joining a lawsuit, my observation, having had a lot of experience with class actions, is you got to be very patient and realistic and realize that that's just the court system that we have.
Okay. And so you were saying when you were giving the 4 things needed for it to become a class action, where is this lawsuit in that process?
Well, this lawsuit has not been certified yet, so that's a big hurdle. When for example you have a tort and you have a bunch of homes that are flooded, for example, and you want to create a mass valuation or a class action that's kind of synonymous there. The first step is getting it certified, and it's a big step. Once you get it certified or establish liability, if it's not a class action, that's a whole phase in and of itself that can take years. Then once it's certified or you establish liability, then you actually get into the actual litigation and get into court. But on a practical basis, a lot of people are surprised. Most lawsuits settle, but they don't settle, generally speaking, until they're certified or until liability is established. In other words, the defendants, and I've been on the defense side many times, don't offer a lot of settlement dollars until they really process that first phase where they have a shot at beating it. strategically. So it's going to be a while. But this lawsuit
is that the phase that this one is in certification? Like that's the first step they're trying to get to.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I don't know the time frame. Would
that be the next headline, I guess, is if it does get certified, would that be the next time that maybe it comes up in the news that we would hear about it, or not necessarily?
Well, the news is interesting. It can come up. They may not report on the certification. It's a big milestone. I can't overemphasize that. But what I'm trying to tell people is with any kind of class action lawsuit, you don't kind of sign up and then wait at the mailbox and expect a check tomorrow.
Right.
It could be years. And the thing is that a lot of people that are enjoined in the class, I just got a check for something like $54 from a class action lawsuit I didn't even know I was part of. So it can get very interesting from the perspective of people joining the class and then the length of it. And it's very fluid, and you got to be very patient. And there's not a lot of clear black and white answers. These are decisions made by the court, and a lot of it's just simply unknown.
Okay, so we're in it for the long haul, and and hopefully we can just keep touching on this as it goes. So, and I think that is the expectation that we have. We just kind of wanted to report that it is happening again. And then I've heard that as things progress, it's possible for more states to join in, right, for this to become a federal, not just a California case, but a federal case?
Well, it isn't. This case I think we're talking about is a federal case, but it's in
it is.
Yeah, federal courts divided into sections around the country. And again, how that goes down and how that's resolved is up to the courts. And, I've seen I go to these legal conventions and things, and I've sat next to the attorneys that defend the tobacco lawsuits that are just massive coast to coast class action lawsuits. But a lot of how that is ultimately settled, again, it's up to the court. And we'd all be badly advised to guess what the court's going to do, because we just don't know.
Can people still attempt to join this if they are interested in joining or being part of the class action?
I would call the attorneys and ask them. I don't know. There a lot of times judges will institute deadlines for joining the class and so forth, and the attorneys keep track of all the scheduling and calendaring for those deadlines.
Okay, that was my understanding of how things work. But when you said you just got a $54 check for a class action that you weren't aware that you were a part of, like, how does that work? And would that be a possibility here? With all the members of the church, like tithing records and putting that in, is it a possibility that, I don't know, is that something that you can explain more? Is it, did you forget that you had joined a class action? Maybe it was just a piece of paper you sent in, or you really didn't do anything, but somehow because you were a customer or something, that was just a new thing that you threw in, and I don't know what that means or how that works.
I knew nothing about it. I was apparently a customer of something and the company got tagged for doing something wrong, and I got a check, and I guess I got a notice of it, but I just threw it away like junk mail. That's the kind of fun aspect of class actions. Some people are made class, they're put into the class, and they don't want to be. They either don't want to sue the party, or they want to do it independently, so they pull out of the class. Other people join the class and may not know about it, that don't know that they're members. Some people want to be part of it, aren't part of it. They call the attorneys and they're made part of it. There's all kinds of things going on. I've also been part of lawsuits where neighborhood meetings are made, and they sign up as many neighborhood folks from the neighborhood as they possibly can, because they go for the class action. But if that's denied and the certification is denied, they still go forward on an individual basis. And the judge will often consolidate those lawsuits into one trip to the courtroom. So it's it's just very big and complex, and ultimately these decisions are made by the court.
Wow. Okay. It definitely sounds like a long road. So I think, some people think that these things are coming out because the church is now known to be so wealthy and are looking for a big payout. And I would say, I mean, based on what I know already, and I'm not part of this lawsuit, I'm not in it, but it seems that going into it, most should understand that it's not a big payout and it's more the principle of the matter and kind of the fraud and the deception behind it. Would you agree?
Well, generally speaking, the payouts can be big or they can be small or something in the middle. Um, Ultimately, that's, well, let me back up. Most lawsuits, once you get certified in a class action, they settle. They don't actually go to court. I don't know the numbers, but from my experience, it's well over 90% settle. So once the thing to keep your one's eye on is if once it gets certified, because once it gets certified, that's a big signal to the defendant that things are not going your way. And then they get serious about the settlement conversations. And like I say, normally they do settle, but sometimes they do go to court. And I've been to court where they don't settle. And I'll tell you, defendants, whether you're talking an oil company or anyone with the deep pockets, they fight very vigorously, and it's not a cakewalk. And that's the process. But it's high stakes. Oftentimes, I mean, my firm probably in the last 6 months or a year, we've been involved in, I don't know, billions of dollars of settlements and judgments. It's high stakes. So I don't have the answers for this lawsuit or any lawsuit other than to say this is the experience, and it may be more than a principle. There may be significant cash compensation, or there may not. That's the nature of litigation.
Do you think there's any, let's say, again, just hypothetically, it gets certified, and then whether or not there's a settlement or it goes to court, are there other like ramifications for the church if this does get certified? Does it open the church up to more lawsuits coming in? Or will they change the ways that they talk about or take in tithing, or will it just they settle in and nothing changes?
I think on a practical basis, it's too early to know any of that. These are relatively new lawsuits. As you correctly pointed out, one lawsuit was filed, it was denied, overturned on appeal. And I don't expect us to really get answers for, we'll be talking years from now about that. So I think it's fascinating.
Okay. This is new territory.
Yeah, it kind of is. And we just have to, sit back, grab our popcorn, and watch the show because it's going to be a long show.
Okay. All right. And we're in for it. So hopefully we will continue to give updates as this goes along, whether the next update is weeks, months, or years from now. Randy, I guess I want to give it over to you if there's anything else you want to add that you think people might know or need to know or not know based on your experience. And then and then any closing thoughts after that.
Sure, Maven. I guess I'd just say, if you're interested in this lawsuit as far as being on, entering a claim, call the attorneys. As I said at the very beginning, I'm not an attorney. I just am familiar with class actions, and I'm giving kind of a practical observation from at least my experience with them, and that's all. But call the attorney and ask questions. I know several people that have entered as class reps class action lawsuits, and it's an interesting situation. It's high stakes. It's a fascinating field. Judges tend to be very smart. They see through a lot of the hoaxes and nonsense, and more times than not, they tend to render agreements that I agree with. But I just want to hopefully give people a sense of timing and realistic expectation, so that people are making smart decisions. And I think the number one thing is call the attorneys and ask the more detailed questions. that might relate
probably
to
better
this.
sooner rather than later, in case there is, a deadline on this. As you said, there sometimes is to join. So
Yeah.
that would be, I think,
Yeah.
maybe one bit of advice. If there's any interest at all, just ask.
Yeah, call right away, because I've seen a lot of people kicked out because they just missed the deadline. In fact, I have one lawsuit where there was a 10-year statute of limitations. Statute of limitations means you have to file your lawsuit, but within a specific time frame, or you lose the right to file any lawsuit. And literally, it was filed the day before the statutes expired, which was a 10-year statute. So you never know. That's why it's so smart to call the attorneys right away and explain your personal situation. They can give you, specific legal advice as it relates to your situation.
All right. And because it is a federal case, that means anyone in the country can call in and ask, or is it wouldn't still be just California residents? Is that correct?
Well, the circuit, the California circuit, I'd have to look at the map, and I don't have it in my mind how far that geographically extends. I would just say, as a blanket statement, if you've got a question, no matter where you are, call the attorneys. They know what they're doing, generally speaking. They can tell you whether it makes sense, or you can,
or route you to the right person to go to.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. I think that's it for me. Thank you so much for being willing to come on the show and explain a little bit about this. And I guess this is a story that we will keep tabs on over the next couple of years. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me, Maven. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you again, too. All right. Bye, everybody.